money is a human invention, right? But humans existed before money.
But I think that if I really had to be specific, I think my best answer would be it's his balance sheet.
And so money is effectively, if it's doing its job well, we're completely unaware of it.
Essentially, money is the denominator that everyone uses as a common frame of reference.
We exchange money so that we each agree where we are going to put our attention.
My personal latest thinking is like money is information.
So in that sense, money is just a tool, right? And tools are instruments that save us time.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up, I guess, Ayn Rand earlier. I mean, she said the verdict you pronounce upon money, which is the source of your livelihood, is the verdict you pronounce upon your life.
Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's Wolf NYC, WOLFNYC.com. To take it maybe like on a slightly more philosophical bent, if we analogize money to being something like economic water, right? It's the medium that we're all immersed within. We're constantly thinking through it and using it to deal with one another, even if we don't. Like I just bought this can of water for $1 earlier. How many tens of thousands of people are connected to the production structure and supply chains that went about bringing this aluminum can filled with soda water, sparkling water, and delivered it into a refrigerated unit into this building, and I could just go down there and pay $1 and get it? I mean, I just communicated with tens of thousands of people without ever knowing it, right? For me, it was just scanning. I actually paid with Bitcoin, so I just scanned a little QR code, paid a few thousand sats, poof, here it is. But what I fail to see or fail to account for, all the tens of thousands of people that go into making this thing possible. It is very much like economic water in that we're communicating with people all the time, even when we don't know it. We're all swimming in the same water, I guess you might say. So if money is economic water, fiat currency is inscrutably murky, right? It has lots of noise. You can't tell whether the price changes are real or they are inflation driven, monetary policy driven. And Bitcoin would be the opposite. Bitcoin would be crystal clear economic water, has pure signal, absolutely zero unexpected inflation or supply fluctuations. And an economy run on a Bitcoin standard would
again, Mises, would then have fewer booms and busts, right? It would be a more stable, more healthy, more sustainable economic system. So in trade, everything is valued at some ratio of everything else. For instance, you might say that a car is worth 132 chairs or a house is worth 11 cars, something like that, right? Everything is exchangeable at a ratio of everything else. These are called exchange ratios. And one useful definition of money is that it is just the medium through which we more easily calculate these exchange ratios. So in that sense, money is just a tool, right? And tools are instruments that save us time. So specific to money, money is going to be a tool that helps us save time in the negotiation, calculation, and execution of trades. So you could think of it as like something that accelerates the free market process that helps us refine our ideas and drive innovation in technology. So generating time savings like that, that's the purpose of all tools. So the shovel, right? This is my common example. You can dig a lot more holes per hour using a shovel than you can with your bare hands. So the shovel is an instrument that accelerates you in your aim towards hole digging, right? Just like money is an instrument that accelerates you in your aim of trade with someone else. And so this is also, you could think of this too as when you're buying and selling something, market actors are basically communicating their preferences into the marketplace. So if I decide to buy a house and sell a car, the information that I'm pushing out to the market with that buy and sell decision is to make more houses, right? Because I've increased the net demand on houses, and decrease production of cars because I've reduced the net demand for automobiles. I'm actually selling the automobile, reducing demand. So, and it's that system of propagating information, ideas, and preferences that is what's coordinating people, right? It's what lets you know what to do. So when you wake up as a producer of houses and you see that, house prices have gone up a little bit in an area, then you are actually incentivized to go out and produce more houses. And vice versa. If you're the car manufacturer, you see the prices of cars are being slightly depressed, then you have an incentive to produce less cars or a disincentive to produce more cars, however you want to put it. So that's just kind of alluding to money's, let's say, informational properties and how it propagates information throughout a society via the price signal.
And so now with doing all these episodes that you've done, currently, when someone asks you, how would you describe money? Like, what would you say? Like, what is money? My personal latest thinking is like money is information. Like I'm getting information from the money. I feel like my answer is always changing. What is your current? Because sometimes I'll say, oh, okay, it's purchasing power. Money is purchasing power. What's your current definition of money, or working hypothesis, or working theory? Because having listened to you, I know you're exploring this quite deeply. But if someone was to ask you what is money, what would you answer today? I'm not holding you to this. I know it can change.
Well, look, it's not change. There's just multiple answers. There are many. I think I have a running document with 50 some odd answers. I've written about several of them, probably upwards of 10 on the blog, writing out different answers and explaining what it means. But I'll run with what you put out there, actually. So you said information. I've also often thought about money as kind of a composite between information, energy, and time. It's obviously information in the sense that it conveys the price signal, right? So this is taking the aggregate supply of an asset in the world and taking all of the ordinal valuations that people are placing on that asset, right? The preferences people have to hold gold or whatever the commodity is. And it's distilling all of that activity, right? This whole constant storm of trading and decision-making and action taking, it compresses all of that into the price signal. And so that one number has massively compressed this entire data set called the world economy or the world market for gold or for any other commodity, right? So it's a miraculous data compression technology, just in the fact that money enables the pricing system. Obviously, money is related to energy in the sense of proof of work, right? This is what secured gold supply from debasement historically. The fact that it was expensive to discover it, mine it, refine it, coin it, etc. That was a cost, a prohibitive cost that prevented the over expansion or the overinflation of gold supply. And if you overly inflate or expand the supply of something, obviously you compromise its integrity as a store of value. So it's the energy expenditure necessary to make gold money that secured its supply from inflation or counterfeiting. That's what made it the best store of value historically. So all of that obviously deeply connected to energy, right? And fiat would be the reverse. When you actually create a monetary instrument that has basically zero energy cost to produce new units of, it suffers hyperinflation, right? People overissue, they overprint, overinflate, over counterfeit, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same thing, and suck all the energy out of the money, right? That's kind of the pathology we've been engaged in over time. And then finally, time, money, pretty obvious, right? It's something we exchange our time for, and then we take into the marketplace and we expect other people to make commensurate sacrifices for the money we hold, right? When we go and buy something at a restaurant or clothing, right? There's time and effort that went into producing these goods and services that we're actually using money as an instrument to lay claim on. So in that way, it's not an exact legal analogy, but I say that in the same way that a company stock certificate is title to company capital, that money is title to human time, right? It doesn't actually mean that money gives you ownership of human time, but in effect, in the marketplace, obviously it commands people's time and attention. So that's three sort of elemental ways to think about what money is, but there are many, many answers. It feels like maybe through the emergence of Bitcoin, we're discovering how impactful money is on consciousness, actually. That money is a tool that we use to scale human consciousness, perhaps. Again, back to the price signal, right? You can get a whole lot of data in one little price that lets the human consciousness interact with the market, which the market is just all the rest of human consciousness in the world. So, and you can't have that bridge between the individual and the collective market process without money. So, let me ask you. So yeah, Carl Jung, alchemy. This sounds almost like the Philosopher's Stone a little bit. That was prophesied for a long time that we would discover. Or I guess we would discover in nature, in the laboratory of nature, we would find redemption. Was kind of the premise of the Philosopher's Stone, that we could find some incorruptible substance that would serve as an antidote to tyranny. And, we could wax philosophical about this, but it is very interesting to me that Bitcoin does seem to be incorruptible, at least in its supply cap, right? No one knows how to change that or break that. And you mentioned earlier, so all of this to me, like namesake of the show, obviously it begs the question, well, what is this money stuff we're talking about? Like, if it's so impactful on human consciousness, it's necessary for truth discovery, perhaps it's going to usher in this revolution, towards of human consciousness, let's say. Earlier, you described photosynthesis as a perfect market. So what in your mind is serving as money in the perfect market of photosynthesis? And I'm trying to back into the question here to you, which is what is money ultimately, but I'd like to understand, I'm trying to look at money through a non-economic lens, a more ontological lens, let's say. So that's why I ask you, what in your opinion is the money of the perfect market that you call photosynthesis?
It brings us to the conversation about art. So what makes art and what makes beauty? And so what makes Mona Lisa the most viewed masterpiece in the world? Something like 20 or 30,000 people look at the Mona Lisa every single day in the Louvre. What is it about that assembly of lines and colors and that was done is so powerful? because it completely, there's an absence of any intermediation between what the artist is saying and what the person viewing the artist is hearing. So the artist is reaching out. I mean, the Mona Lisa is a great example because her eyes follow you around the room. You know, people who see it will tell you this. That's the artist looking at you. And there's nothing between the artist and you. Their art is the perfect lens to capture that moment. And so money is effectively, if it's doing its job well, we're completely unaware of it. And I think money's origins go back to humans' quest to move. I think humans uniquely of all animals need to explore. And to explore means you're moving out of where you were born and you're moving into places that you are unfamiliar with. And the easiest way to do that is to have something that you can trade with. Because if you just show up unannounced and nobody knows who you are, they're going to stick a sword in your eyeball and you're going to be dead. But if there's a knowledge out there that, hey, you know what? There in this area, the people who polish stones to a very high degree and we use them as jewelry, they're sought after. And before we kill this guy, let's see if he has any of those polished stones that talk about, you know, we can trade with them. And of course, it does also encourage bad behavior as well. But you're traveling through time with something that you can use as a medium of exchange, which is money. And over time, that has evolved from various different types and forms to give humans the ability to be mobile and to interact with other human beings. Humans are desperately lonely in this universe because we have brains that are way beyond our ability to use them. And so we get lost in our own minds and we need other people around to avoid going insane. And the way to do that is to simply interact with other humans. And the way to do that is you've got to get off your ass and move, and you've got to travel. And to do that, you need to trade with something and to get food, to find out to get information. I mean, this is where money and information, the parallels come, because you're using your money, your exchangeable good, to get the information you need to find out, well, how do I get some water? How do I get, where am I? You know? So then this evolves into this information network over, 100,000 years or more, specifically over the past 5 to 10,000 years, over the past few hundred years. Obviously, the gold has become the number one money because it has great attributes. If you're somebody traveling around and you need a medium of exchange in a way that it gives you the ability to travel through time, because gold's purchasing power due to its scarcity remains constant. And it allows you to travel through space because it's somewhat portable, it's divisible, it's fungible. So with gold, you have the ability to be free, to walk anywhere. You can go anywhere in the world. If I have gold, they'll take it. That's the great thing about gold. Flash forward to Bitcoin. Bitcoin does everything that gold and money we expect it to do, except it does it better. It does it in the digital age. It's more secure. It's more portable. Everything that we talk about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin represents the long search for perfect money in that sense. And as a result, it has caused massive neurological problems in people who are incapable of handling this idea of perfect money. Again, so you have someone like a Sam Bankman-Fried who looks at the quote unquote crypto market and becomes the biggest crook in history. And then you have somebody like a Michael Saylor or a President Bukele who looks at it and says, this is actually a way to help or engineer our lives and our economy in ways that are going to benefit everybody.
And this idea of capitalist profit, which many people on the left seem to be very afraid of, really only implies two things. Profit is not something extra. It is a measure of the efficiency of the process. When we take profit out of the process, and this is why we see that non-governmental organizations, nonprofit, actually governmental organizations, which don't have to make ends meet, incur some of the greatest waste possible because they can always foist their losses on the taxpayer. So it isn't that profit is something extra or that it's something that only accrues to a few people. It is the efficiency of capital allocation that allows for the lowest prices in the marketplace, that allows for capitalists to hire more labor, and allows for the most efficient redistribution of that wealth, right? When Amazon becomes more wealthy, what do? They turn around and grow more and hire more people. I think there are probably a few nuances in there which we should break down so that we're helping people, because I think it's a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow. It's like, hey, wait, why is profit this great thing? Well, it's this great thing because it allows us to incentivize efficiency. And if we don't put profits first, we're incentivizing inefficiency, which is exactly what we get in either overproduction or underproduction of goods in planned economies.
I love the definition, actually. Profit is the measurement of the efficiency of the market process. And admittedly, maybe that's somewhat of it's not a precise measurement, right? Sometimes people get on to me when you say money is a measure of value. Of course, value is subjective. You can't precisely mathematically measure it, but it's sort of an approximate gauge, let's say. And that is what you want, right? You want to increase aggregate profits for every market actor, because that essentially means they are in a market. When I say market, I mean in a forum where property cannot be violated, only consensually exchanged. That basically indicates that they are satisfying the demands, the most urgent demands of consumers in the most efficient, effective way possible, right? And it's that race that drives innovation, that drives intelligent capital allocation. It's like people are saying, we want this. They're voting with their wallets through buying and selling. And then producers are rushing in to satisfy those demands. And the more profits you create, that means that indicates that you're doing a better job. So we have this weird demonization of profits in the minds of most people today. You know, they talk about like, oh, for-profit companies, and oh, this is a non-profit company, so this company's okay. It's like the exact opposite, actually, right? Not that nonprofits are bad per se, but they're not going to drive innovation and efficient capital allocation the same way a for-profit organizations will.
Yeah, the Austrians have a great line on this. And I think Mises explicitly says, he said, profit is a psychic phenomenon. What does that mean? This is the reason that in a voluntary exchange, both people can profit and both people can come out richer, because you wouldn't have effected the exchange if you didn't think the good you were going to receive was more valuable to you than the money that was in your pocket. And I guess that's how Mises breaks down this paradox, is that yes, there are these kind of cardinal objective numbers or prices in the market, but the actual feeling of profit is and the feeling of value is an intensive quality, I should say, and individuals have to judge that for themselves. But one of the ways that we keep score, and one of the ways that we know which businesses should continue and which shouldn't, is simply by looking at, is that business able to make ends meet? And this is really, I don't know how we got here, but this is really the connection that proof of work has to reality. And when planned economies become disconnected from reality and they just say, well, everybody should have everything, time and time again, Vietnam, the former Soviet Union, the list goes on and on and on. They just end up producing massive, massive shortage and massive poverty, North Korea being another example.
If you are a business owner or manager, you should know these three numbers: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000 is the number of businesses that have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, which allows you to streamline accounting, financial management, human resources, and more. NetSuite turns 25 years old this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days rather than weeks, and to drive down cost. And finally, 1, because your business is one of a kind. So with NetSuite, you get a customized solution for all your key performance indicators in one efficient system with one source of truth. NetSuite is everything you need all in one place. Right now, you can download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/whatismoney. That's netsuite.com/whatismoney to get your free KPI checklist. Again, netsuite.com/whatismoney. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touch screen, It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet.
Everyone still needs dollars.
Yeah.
Right? In the dollar economy, you want to go down to the grocery store. That won't always be the case. And like you said, I'm not eliminating the fluctuating uncertainty of the dollar via Bitcoin, even though some people might use it that way. It's like, I know that Bitcoin is a better form of money.
Yes.
And everybody else is going to figure that out. And in the future, I'm going to need Bitcoin to go buy gas at the gas station and food at the grocery store. And there is a very big difference of trading Bitcoin to get more dollars versus recognizing that Bitcoin is a better form of money. And if I'm going to want to trade with other people that are delivering goods and services to the market, I'm going to need that form of money.
Right.
And so I do think that is a very fundamental distinction. And that people figure that's like when the light bulb goes off. And I think the part of it is like if you canvass your group of friends or your network of people, not more than 1 out of 100 people understand that Bitcoin is a better form of money.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a conservative. Like maybe it's still 1 in 1,000.
Because they don't understand money largely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't understand money. And money's hard to understand. I like to say that's the hardest thing to understand about Bitcoin. It has very little to do with Bitcoin, everything to do about what money is. But if people accept that no more than 1 out of 100 people really grok Bitcoin, and it's probably realistically no more than 1 in 1,000, then to say it's a hedge to inflation, if 999 out of 1,000 people do not understand something and then inflation appears, you cannot expect everyone just to like herd over to that point.
Right.
That it's a process of understanding that question. The definition of your show was money.
And inflation. People don't really know what that is.
Yeah, but that is, it's like, and to your question, because I think about it the same way. It is the counterparty risk, the problem of trust, like inherently, like because counterparty risk can be thought of as like, what is somebody that I have a contract with? Are they going to perform?
Yeah.
But in the Fed's world, because they can arbitrarily create money, it is a trust-based system, and that is inherently at odds with independent people throughout an economy relying on a form of money and having to have trust in a few group of people who have maximum control.
Yeah.
And I talk about some in the piece, but that is the core distinction. It's like fixed money supply, ever increasing debasement, but it's also trust-based system, trustless system. And the only way we get this world where we can have a solution to inflation is it being trustless and not having to put trust into anybody else, because not just that trust has been broken, but there is an inherent problem with a trusted model when it comes to your money.
Absolutely.
I think you answered the question, what is money? In your conversation with Saylor, you said it's purchasing power, essentially, something like that, right? Something.
And I'd expand that too. I think it's money might not be purchasing power. It's purchasing power would be what it allows you to do. But I think that if I really had to be specific, I other than pieces of paper, I think my best answer would be it's just balance sheet. That's all it is. Money is just, it's a bank's balance sheet. That's it. And you, if you want to throw in base money, it's the Fed's balance sheet. It's just that's all we're dealing with here. It's just a network of balance sheets at the end of the day.
Yeah, so agreed. And you could say balance sheet is almost representative of purchasing power, right? That's what your net worth is kind of your net assets, effectively, the fair market value of the organization, whatever it may be. If we could just simplify money as a container for this purchasing power, right? You get to put purchasing power in this little container and transact it with other people. In that transaction, where the US government creates $10 trillion in new treasuries, sells them to the Fed is effectively lending the US government the purchasing power of dollar holders, right? Or dollar savers, because they're introducing new dollars into circulation that is diluting the purchasing power of savers over time. We said we were going to talk about this though. Like, what is you had a definition of money I think you wanted to share. Well, and it's my favorite question, so I have to ask you, what is money?
I love that you asked this question, but I asked this question from a completely different context than you. Like, I see money as the ability to exchange. It's the way that we make agreements or focus attention. We exchange money so that we each agree where we are going to put our attention. You build a building by putting a certain amount of capital that gets all parties who are participating to focus on building this building. It's like the physical manifestation of focus. But I asked this question from a different context when I'm working with entrepreneurs, because the business model of capitalism.com is that we teach entrepreneurship. We teach entrepreneurs, and we excel in getting entrepreneurs to their first million. That's our bread and butter. And it's so interesting to see the beliefs that people bring to entrepreneurship that they have about money, and that their beliefs about money either support or hinder their success as an entrepreneur, whereas money is just the way that we're focusing attention and creating exchange between each other. If you can get an entrepreneur to realize that money isn't actually real, that money is just a mechanism through which we trade, it almost melts their brain in the same way that you might have had your brain melt when you saw how big Bitcoin could get. That it's almost a fundamental new way to view the world. Because we have these stories about, well, money is freedom. It's ridiculous. Money doesn't equal. Money and freedom are completely unattached one another. They are completely different things. You can have a lot of money and not be free. You can have a lot of money and be free. The opposites are true too. They are separated. They are mutually exclusive. And if you believe that money is free, then you're always dependent on money for freedom, and therefore you're a slave to money. That's a very interesting paradox. And so if you can get an entrepreneur specifically, or an investor, to see that money is the expression of focus, the expression of value, the ironic thing is then they start aligning their focus and their value appropriately, and they start making a lot of money. And so money is a made-up idea to give ourselves permission to focus and to serve one another. That is my definition of money.
I like that. It's funny you described it as kind of a means of allocating our attention. I wrote a blog series on that. That was one of my answers to the question, what is money? Money is an attention allocation technology.
Yes, it is.
It's just telling us where, what relevant features of the world should we be putting our attention towards, right? It's a way of signaling, right? And we say this all the time. Actions speak louder than words, obviously. Well, what is capital? Capital is the result of many, 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 many actions, right? It takes a lot of actions to get your first million or whatever the piece of capital is. Well, that carries a lot more weight than any individual action, right? Someone puts $1 million into a deal. That says a lot more than what they did last night at dinner, something like that.
Right. That's right.
So agreed with all that. I would, again, maybe this is where the term freedom is ambiguous, because I agree, money is not freedom per se. But if we're defining freedom as optionality, then there's a pretty strong correlation, because money is just pure optionality in the marketplace. But that doesn't mean money's going to give you psychological freedom, right? You can't just be rich and like be internally free, I guess, right? I would classify that as more like something like the absence of fear, right? That would be something
Psychologically, for sure.
Yes, psychologically free. So
Well,
that
you
term freedom
have to,
gets muddied, it gets.
Well, you need resources in order to have optionality.
Yes.
And money is the most easily exchanged resource.
Yeah. Exactly.
So again, I think money is the manifestation of choice or focus, but I don't think that it necessarily is the driver of freedom and choices.
I agree with that. It's what someone else said this. It's one of the most salient signals that humans can communicate, basically. Right. Yeah, someone's investing in your project or whatever. That means they believe in you, right? They're putting their skin in the game. They're putting their energy, their life force behind you. That says a lot more than standing on the sideline and applauding your efforts, right? It speaks much more. The volume is much louder in that action of investing versus applauding.
Yeah, that in the same way, purchasing something says a lot more than providing feedback for something. I remember I was buying a car and I test drove the car, and the salesperson says, did you like it? I said, yeah, I liked it. And he said, do you want to own it? And I said, I might like to own it, but I don't want to buy it. and just in expressing that, it was like, I like this enough to have it,
right?
But I don't like this enough to spend resources on it. And so which is the greater expression of value?
Right.
If you say you like it, or if you spend money on it.
100%. Yeah. The skin in the game. It is a medium that imparts skin in the game, right? Because like given a free choice, everyone's going to choose to own the private island, obviously. When the price tag is associated with the ownership, you get a lot fewer people ponying up the private island.
That's right.
That's an interesting take. So you mentioned too, your background is in Austrian economics, but you thought that perhaps that may have given you some hesitancy about Bitcoin originally. And I think you brought up Schiff early on. Like that's a guy that, again, gold bug, right? Agrees with Bitcoiners on all the problem set, but disagrees on the solution. What is it about? Because for me, it was the opposite. Austrian economics actually clarified a lot of my thinking around Bitcoin. So I'm wondering what aspects of Austrian economics gave you hesitancy about Bitcoin?
Robert, I have a religious background. I went to college, Indiana Wesleyan University. Thought I was going to be a pastor for a good part of my life. Ended up studying economics, and so there's a religious undertone to my formative years, but also a religious undertone to the school of economics that I was taught. Because instead of becoming a pastor, I studied business and economics. And so I think there is, at least in my experience, or my experience was a very black and white view to how the world should be, how the government should be, how the economy should operate. And anything that violated a religious view is going to be seen as bad. Right. There's very little flexibility in a religious view of anything. And I mean religious by the idea of black and white and no
fundamentalism.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And I think Bitcoin was such a radical idea and such a new idea from where most of us that come from the school of thought of Austrian economics, that it took some time to sort of soften to the idea of it, because Bitcoin isn't perfect. It's very good. It's very good. But there are still some like philosophical questions or technologies that we haven't quite worked out yet, or some use cases that we haven't seen yet. We don't have 500 years of history to be able to compare to. And so I think it violates the fundamental view in the same way that, rock music was a threat to churches. It's a new way of viewing the expression of values that we might agree on, but our backgrounds and fundamentalist views prevent us from adopting it least quickly. And I think that's okay. Like, new ideas shouldn't always be accepted right away. That's when you get crypto pump and dumps.
Right.
But I think we're starting to realize that Bitcoin is winning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a strange one, because I think one of the most useful answers, I guess, to the question, what is money, is just when you arrive at the properties of good money. And people will name, anywhere between 3 to 30 properties of useful money. I found the Austrian economic and libertarian philosopher Gary North very clarifying on this. He narrows it down to 5, right? Good. You want money that's divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, scarce. And so when you understand that these are the attributes you want in a good money. This is what you want the tool to do these things.
Yeah.
It helps you get past the specific instantiation of those things. Like, all of a sudden, my view with gold bugs is they're too attached to the vehicle that best satisfied those properties historically, which is gold, right? Gold was
That's right.
the most divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, scarce thing we ever had. That doesn't mean that it's the most optimal money we will ever have, right? So you almost have to get one layer beneath the physical instantiation of the money to really understand what we're looking for. And I think when you look at money through that lens, and I got this from Austrian economics, that's why it was so clarifying for me, that you can now see a potential future where gold is actually supplanted, right? Supplanted by superior form of money, which, again, looking at Bitcoin through a similar lens, I think it's superior to gold. So therefore, people will favor the superior monetary technology.
The time may come in our lifetimes or not that something better than Bitcoin arrives. And if that is the case, there will likely be a lot of resistance from Bitcoin maximalists.
We'll be the old gold bugs by then.
Exactly that, right? And so in some ways, we're all humans and we are all vulnerable to religious thinking of our way of operating that got us to this point is superior to anything new. Right. And I think, since even you are a Bitcoin maximalist, you've seen enough projects come and go and opportunities come and go and make promises and go away that you're pretty set in your position that Bitcoin is the best alternative, and that it's extremely rare that anything soon is going to come along and supplant it or replace it. That's Peter Schiff and gold. And so I think we are all vulnerable to that type of thinking based on the experience that gets us here.
Yeah, I would agree with that to an extent. So I do think, the old adage, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. There's some truth in that, right? There's a reason Bitcoin is generational, right? Older people tend to not get it as much as younger people, right? So there's definitely some truth in that, but I would add, there's definitely my empirical observational experience of seeing shitcoin after shitcoin project promise the moon and catastrophically implode. But there's also the theoretical, the rationalistic view that I don't know. Again, if you're looking at Bitcoin as money, right? It's perfected these properties. I won't say perfected, virtually perfected. It's infinitely divisible, unlimited durability. You can audit the entire supply, fully counterfeit resistant, very portable. Obviously, it's just information and it has a fixed supply of 21 million. So it's basically like maxed out the design space for good money. So it's not just the observation of shitcoins failing. There's also a theoretical underpinning. It's like from a rational standpoint, if a new money did emerge that outcompeted Bitcoin, what would it look like? What would it do? Mm-hmm. So that, like, it's hard. No one's conceptualized, in my opinion, no one's conceptualized anything where any gap, let's say, in Bitcoin's attributes is good money. So like, okay, that's one thing. Maybe I have blind spots. Maybe there's a property or three that I don't know about good money that some other technology will figure out. But the last piece to this argument that's really strong is, even if that were the case and shitcoin XYZ has 3 new properties that Bitcoin doesn't have, and we really need in good money, well, Bitcoin is open source, right? Bitcoin still has this capacity to absorb feature set from other competitive technologies. So it still maintains this ability to adapt. It's not like gold doesn't adapt really, right? You can't
but
do a
people would have
software
made
update on
similar
gold.
arguments for gold for hundreds of years, right? Because they couldn't conceive anything different, and because the technology didn't exist for Bitcoin. The chance exists that in 100 years there may be something completely different that we can't see.
Of course.
And my original point was just that I think the Bitcoin maximalists of today will be the gold bugs of yesterday.
Yeah.
If and when that system comes along, because we're all sort of vulnerable to that religious thinking if we're not more committed to values than we are about being right.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I always want to reserve the humility to be wrong, right? Especially a long
which
time.
is rare today.
Well, if you're talking 100 plus years in the future, you're almost certainly fucking wrong. No matter what you're almost guaranteed to be wrong about whatever you think.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world. My thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is much more clear. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from 1,473 human trials conducted over a period of 32 years. So if you're looking to start enhancing your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. And I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. With Wasabi Wallet, you can receive, send, and store Bitcoin privately. In Wasabi Wallet, your transaction history and wallet balance are completely hidden. Wasabi Wallet is easy to use, all of its privacy features are built in by default, and it works with any amount of Bitcoin. Wasabi users can make CoinJoin transactions together with BTC Pay server users or Trezor Suite users. For BTC Pay server users, they can make payments directly inside of a CoinJoin. And for Trezor Suite users, you can make CoinJoins directly on a hardware wallet. These features result in fee savings and security improvements for both sets of users. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download the state-of-the-art Bitcoin privacy wallet.
So you host a podcast called the What is Money podcast. So I know we have a limited time here, but I mean, is it too general for me to ask you, Robert, what is money?
Yeah, it's a huge question. One that we spend quite literally hundreds of hours exploring on the show.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have a document with many answers to this question, like over 50. I've blogged about several of them, maybe like a dozen or so. Very seemingly simple question, but it definitely opens up into this cavernous kind of philosophical rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And maybe one useful way to conceptualize money, or one of the useful framings or definitions, is that money is the language of value. And so if we try to parse that apart a little bit, language, somewhat obvious, like the three of us are all running the open source software called English right now. It's a software package, right? And
yep.
It only works to the extent that we share consensus on terms. So when I say the word term, right, I have to assume that you have in your mind roughly the same meaning as I am projecting. That's what lets me be able to make noises with my face hole, and you can decrypt it in your own mind and we can communicate, right? It's a very powerful software package. People don't typically think about language that way, that it's a technology, but it is. I would also add in here things like numeracy, right? Mathematics is another one of these very powerful software packages that we don't think about a lot, but it's something that distinguishes man from animal in a lot of ways. And so money is the language of value. Value is a bit of a mysterious term. I think Ayn Rand has a great definition for value. And she says, value is that which man acts to gain or keep. So it's whatever we are orienting human action towards.
Mm-hmm.
You could say actually that any action you're taking in a particular moment is an expression of your highest value, right? We all have an internalized hierarchy of preferences or values, things we want to do, right? And whatever you're doing in that moment comes at the necessary exclusion of all other things you could be doing, right? Action, any particular path of action is mutually exclusive to all other potential paths of action. So money is something that is communicating. It takes everyone has their own internalized hierarchy of value. We're acting in the world, expressing what we value. And money is this strange sort of linguistic software that compresses all those preferences, which are they're ordinal. So first, second, third, fourth. It turns all that ordinal data into a cardinal value, which is the price. So you can actually put a number to the worth of something, right? The worth of a commodity, the net worth of an individual, right? In a purely economic sense. So one useful way to describe money is as this software package that we're all running that lets us transform our individually held preferences into a collective data point that we can all orient ourselves against, which is the market price. And that sounds super abstract, so I'll try to bring it down to earth a little bit. If you are a copper producer and you see that the price of copper suddenly spikes, you don't need to know why. You don't need to know that maybe a copper mine in Chile collapsed, right? The supply was cut. All you need to know is that the preferences of humans across the world competing in the same market relative to the supply of available copper has suddenly caused that price to move up. So now you as a producer have a direct financial incentive to produce more copper. If the price goes up, well, then all of a sudden you can afford more exotic forms of mining, for instance. And on the other end of the market, as a consumer, when the price goes up, you're incentivized to use less or to use substitutes. Maybe you can use bronze instead of copper or whatever it may be. So the market price is this miraculous coordination tool that no humans need to share a narrative or a story about what happened at all. We can just mathematically express the real conditions of commodities and assets in the world relative to the preferences of all market actors. And so we get this unbelievable amount of data compression, right? There's all these things in the world that are affecting the copper industry, logistics, energy, mining, tariffs. There's countless things that influence the price of copper. But all you need to know as a producer is that the price moved, right? So you get this unparalleled capacity for data compression, and that is necessary for running the distributed computing process we call the market. You have to have accurate prices such that markets can satisfy human wants, which is to say, solve problems, basically. So without money, without the language of value, the market process is not possible. And we are really reduced in our capacity to increase our standard of living, to increase the satisfaction of human wants, to solve more problems. So it's hard to overstate how important of a tool that is, even though it can be a bit difficult to describe.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you got anything to say, but we can elaborate more on this. But I was just curious because money is so important, and yet many people have been conditioned to think money is the root of all evil. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring that up because there's a misconception right there. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, not that money is the root of all evil. The Bible references money thousands of times. It talks about the importance of honest weights and measures. And if you look at Christ in particular, the story of Christ, right, the archetypal human consciousness, right, meeting betrayal with compassion and hatred with love, and just a perfect human, essentially. What does it tell us that the one time Christ loses his shit in the Bible is on the money changers, people that are tampering with the weights and measures they were actually using to coordinate the market process? There's only one time that man goes into full rage mode, and it's against the money changers, which today we call central bankers. So that was a bit of an aside, but to answer the question in particular, I would agree that the love of money or the love of worldly things can be a very reliable pathway to evil, right? If you consider that evil is willingly afflicting on someone, like something in your own self-consciousness you would not enjoy, would hurt you, if you willingly inflict that on another for worldly gain, right, to get more stuff, more food, more money, whatever it is, that seems to be a pretty reliable pathway to evil. And I think it also speaks to the tremendous power of incentives to shape human action. And when I see Christ flipping out on the money changers, again, if money is the language of value, it's as if you're attacking language itself, and which is something we've seen done by a lot of aspiring dictators across time, a lot of wokist in modernity, attacking definitions like man and woman, like all of these things. If you attack language or money, again, if money's language of value, this is the mechanism by which we adapt ourselves to reality, right? Reality is always changing. It's this infinitely fluid and complex domain. We're constantly trying to adapt to it in ways that are prosperous for us, right? We're trying to satisfy more human wants in the face of all this unknown, right? All this complexity. If you attack the medium by which we adapt to reality, which is either language or money, you totally undermine the entire human enterprise, no matter what it is. So this is how I would interpret the importance of money and the reason Christ flipped out. But there's a key difference there, right? It's like the importance of a tool to appreciate and use it properly does not mean loving the pursuit of that tool for its own sake. So we have to distinguish between, I guess, just the purpose of a tool, right? The money will not bring you happiness. You cannot accumulate more money and just become happy by virtue of possessing it. But it is an indispensable tool for the market process to work. And the market process is what satisfies human wants. It's what creates innovation, and it's what creates wealth and abundance in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up, I guess, Ayn Rand earlier. I mean, she said the verdict you pronounce upon money, which is the source of your livelihood, is the verdict you pronounce upon your life.
I mean, you just can't emphasize the importance of this enough that, like, it's in the word rationality, right? We're actually trying to use ratios to compare things. But if that denominator is soft, right, or changeable, then all of a sudden it's very difficult to have rational conversation, because what I say is household income in one moment is different. There's a different unit called household in the next moment. Whereas if we use something like per capita income or per capita assets or debt or whatever we're measuring, we're using the individual as the denominator.
Yes.
And that's also in the word, right? The individual is indivisible. So it's the right constant unit of measurement when we're talking about things economic. And if you're using household statistics or these other useful fictions, which can be useful in just kind of parlance, but when you get into the mathematics of it, you really need to get to the lowest common denominator, I guess, would be what we're searching for here in the individual.
That's right.
And that is necessary to have rational discourse about these topics. It's necessary that we use the right ratios, right numerators, right denominators.
Man, some of the work that we did on Mises is just flooding back to me now. And essentially, money is the denominator that everyone uses as a common frame of reference. And we talked about this example that if you had people constructing a building and everybody had a slightly different definition of a meter, that building wouldn't stand more than 2 or 3 meters tall. So we have a universal denominator, something like a Bitcoin, that allows us to project and build much more stable and efficient and correct economic structures, right? So as we do more complex engineering, more complex creation, a 1 millimeter error doesn't matter, for instance, in let's say a teacup. Boy, it matters a lot in the space shuttle. And that is Mises's point, is that computation demands units, and there's no exchange. There's no accurate economic calculation if people aren't talking about the same thing.
When we talk about printing money being a problem, right? As Mises says, money is that through which we express the pricing. The pricing system is expressed. So we're taking exchange ratios and communicating them in a common denominator of money.
That's right.
When you start to debase that money, you get all these confusing effects inside of the market, right? Price signal distortion, capital misallocation, exacerbating the boom and bust business cycle. And we're saying, again, structurally somewhat the same thing here, that if we speak in terms of changeable categories or classes, we're distorting our ability to have authentic truth-seeking dialogue. We're engaging in some kind of collective self-deception, if you will.
That's right.
Even the way you think, if you think in these terms, in terms of households instead of individuals, like, you're going to confuse yourself. So it's I don't know. It seems very pernicious that we have to get so hard on these definitions, but the majority of people, maybe you don't have an appreciation for how important that is, because it's not so emotionally compelling to tell people, hey, we have to get super precise on our definitions before we continue this conversation. It's much easier to say, down with the 1%, and mobilize this fervor.
Well, populists, this is an unpopular opinion, but I think true analysis, that populists have the easiest job in the world. They tell people what they want to hear, that someone else is responsible for your problems. And there's also, I think what you were getting to, Robert, is that there's a great intellectual burden in having to, what are we all supposed to do? Spend 10 hours a day reading economics? And there is an answer to this, by the way. And that is that we have to dissect things to the matter of principle. You don't have to memorize a lot of economic facts. You do need to know that there is a conflict of interest when a politician makes a numerical argument.
So the confluence of all these things, as you mentioned earlier, is this erosion of national sovereignty. Seems like a tendency towards one locus of power, or one or a few, perhaps, loci of power in the world. In my mind, admittedly, as kind of like a money nerd / Bitcoiner, I don't see any other action we can take other than really holding wealth in something like Bitcoin that actually empowers individual sovereignty as a counterforce against the erosion of national sovereignty or the centralization of wealth. What, in your mind, like what other actions can we take as a counterforce against this centralizing tendency? I assume you would say voting probably doesn't work so well.
No.
And I would agree strongly.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Right. So, what you mentioned about Bitcoin, like that's a step towards sovereignty in your finances. But if you think about like how is one truly free from the system or whatever you want to call it, it's not just about money, is it? Because money is what like we ultimately use to buy the things we need. But what if you can produce the things you need yourself? Or what if you could be in a community that produces those needs or can assist you with them if you don't have money or something like that, right? Because there have been times, obviously, at some point in human history, I mean, money is a human invention, right? But humans existed before money.
Yeah.
So, what do we need to survive? Well, food, shelter, all of that stuff. If you are worried about the government going after Bitcoin, or you want to hedge your bets, not have all your, eggs in one basket, it would make sense to invest in a homestead, in a house, in gardening, or even if you can't do that, you can, put money into like farming co-ops or like local farms that can produce it, and they'll supply you in times of, economic crisis or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but ultimately it comes to developing your local community, whether it's like your local homestead or like your neighborhood, somewhere where you can actually, as one person, like affect actual change. Which is going to be on the local level. So, unfortunately, especially, it's not exclusive to the US, but I think it's true in the US, like you're not really going to get any help with what's coming from the state or national government. Maybe you have a better shot at affecting change in local government for a window of time. But that's not guaranteed either. And, historically, in times of extreme crisis, people have to lean on each other. And the more prepared your community is, whether, I don't really care how people define the size of a community, but it's definitely not going to be that big, any bigger than a county. It's going to be smaller than that. You can, set up a system where you're resilient and independent of the system to the greatest degree possible. And they can't necessarily make that illegal. You know what I mean?
Right. So self-sufficiency, right? Like being able to generate your own power, your own food, shelter, etc.
If you can produce your own needs, you don't need to depend on anyone else for it. So you have sovereignty.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, that's a much more costly existence too, right? That you're
in terms of time, because you
don't get to participate in the global division of labor. So I hear you loud and clear. Like, yes, makes all the sense in the world to be self-sufficient.
But you can do it on a smaller scale, right? So like you don't necessarily have to invest in, okay, I'm going to produce 100% of my own food. You can have a smaller garden and be like, I'm going to produce this year 15%.
Right. Or
something.
So, you
and
need
then I'm
some
gonna make
independence.
contact with the people that live down there, and they're gonna, grow this stuff, and I'm gonna grow this stuff. And if times get hard, like we can share or something, and then you like build a community that way. I'm not necessarily an expert in this stuff, but ultimately it all comes down to parallel systems from the existing system. Because if you continue to be in a situation where you're dependent on the existing system, and they're going about transforming our world, and transforming all of those systems, they are going to try and lure you into this new system that is not like the old system at all. It's much more predatory and controlling and dystopian than anything humans have ever been subjected to in our existence as a species. So you either go along for that ride, or you start investing in how to not go along for that ride.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not going to be the same for everybody. Right.
Yeah. And it's painful either way, right? You can either just lull yourself into complacency, thinking that we're all wearing tinfoil hats and none of this will happen. And then you subject yourself to the ultimate pain of that dystopian future, or you invest, endure some pain
and
now.
Your kids. Yeah.
And your kids. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, grassroots political maneuvering, maybe that has some effect, but obviously it's not going to change these giant power dynamics that are already in motion.